Welcome in. It feels like we're playing a game on the West Coast tonight. At long last, Late Kick is live. It is Sunday night. It is August 9th, the year of our Lord, 2020. A minor to moderate miracle. We're even on air. Colin basically just Apollo 13 the show. So he saved it, and here we are. We have got a lot to talk about tonight. It is not going to be a normal show. Start time, not even included. We've got a lot to talk about, and I'm actually going to do something that we rarely do. I'm going to be joined by a guest really throughout the entire show tonight. We're not doing segments, but what we're going to do is do the same thing that you've been doing, really, over the last hour to 2 days, and that's try and make some sense over seemingly the ever-evolving landscape of college football. There's a lot out there that is being reported. There's a lot more out there that is being rumored. You got players that want to play. You got presidents petrified of playing. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to bring in our 24/7 Sports origination editor. He is the co-host of the Barton and Bud show. Bud Elliott is joining me. We talk about him all the time on the show, so I figured why not bring him in. Bud, now first things first, Bud, can you hear me?
I got you.
That's unbelievable. Hey, this man knows. You know, he and I and Colin are the only people who really are aware of what it took to get us on air tonight. And hanging on, by the way, right now by bubblegum and paper clips. So don't move suddenly, but tell me, how are you doing in Florida?
Doing well, man. Got a little storm tonight, but just enjoying the 100-degree weather today. It was great.
Okay, listen, I'm happy because I can hear you. So let's just, you were very wise this weekend. You kind of hit the pause button and you stepped away from social media. I was not wise enough to do that. So I saw all of this stuff kind of break loose yesterday. But when I talked to you on the phone earlier today, it kind of made me realize, wait a second, a lot of people have a life. So a lot of people may not even be aware of kind of what's going on out there. And really, even since you and I talked today, which was at like 2 or 3 o'clock, a lot more seems to have happened. So really, to get people caught up, yesterday morning, the MAC decided that they were announcing the cancellation, the postponement of their season as a conference postponement. And then you had Pate of Sports Illustrated, for example, tweet out that he was hearing from a prominent industry source that more was coming. And then you had Ross Dellinger, who was echoing that sentiment. And you had Dennis Dodd quoting two Power 5 athletic directors saying, hey, it's only a matter of time, we believe, before the season is canceled. And so then we circle back today, and you have what was described by some as an emergency meeting of Power 5 conference commissioners, according to others, a regularly scheduled meeting of Power 5 conference commissioners. But regardless of who you're listening to, but it seems like what we had today is we had a lot of conversation about what's going to happen with the 2020 college football season. So I'll give my thoughts in due time. But just as we sit here right now, it is 9:32 where you are. It is 8:32 where I am. What do you feel is going on right now in the world of college football?
Well, I think we are about to see if a Power 5 league is going to go ahead and cancel its season. Obviously, we saw the MAC cancel their season, and yet I feel like just 3 or 4 days ago, we had schedule announcements coming out. So all of this has come together very quickly, and concerningly, obviously, but there are concerns out there about it. I suspect that the presidents got with their risk consultants, with their medical people, and said, this is not quite as simple as the conference putting together the schedule, right? There are a lot more concerns here, and I think that some of those include, obviously, liability and also logistics. And with students returning to campus, how do you really pull this off? Not that you can't do it, but I think that maybe the reason why it has happened so fast here is some of those concerns and considerations hitting them all at once.
Yeah, listen, the aggravation, you understand it, I understand it, because, we said as much to each other and have for about the past 2 or 3 months. We have spoken about it on this show ad nauseum at this point, the 595 rule, the 595 principle, and basically what we've seen. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just have to have simple observation skills to notice that if you've watched the news cycles related to this whole thing, it doesn't seem like independent stories come out. It seems like a wave of whatever it's going to be, positive momentum, negative momentum. It's come in waves, and basically what I've surmised is you've got the 5% that feel qualified enough to take a stance or feel, empowered enough to take a stance and make a statement and say we're going to do something and we're not going to do something. And then you got the 95% in decision-making positions kind of content to sit back and wait to move. And I think we saw a lot of that this week because really here's what it comes down to. People just want to be told what's up. Players want to be told what's up. Fans want to be told what's up. Everyone wants to be told just to their face. Everyone's an adult here. What's up? And yet it seems like, if we are to believe what's being reported, the same folks, as you mentioned, who just released conference schedules to us no more than 72 or 96 hours ago are also now the same people being anonymously quoted as sourcing in stories that indicate, hey, the season's about to go up in smoke. So it really leads a lot of people to, I think, draw a fair conclusion that there is no central kind of wavelength or mentality here, with any kind of legitimacy that's driving this. It's just kind of herd mentality, and we're going to wait and see where you go, and then we'll follow. And who's really leading?
I don't disagree with you at all. I will say I think there's a question there. Why would the MAC, a league which has several teams that probably don't belong in FBS, they're probably more FCS, old school naming D1 AA, but why would they're deciding to cancel the year have an impact on the Power 5 league? I think you can fairly argue that some of those MAC schools don't have the money to conduct testing and contact tracing to the extent needed to keep players safe, or at least play games that are virus free. And the conclusion I come to is twofold. First, I do wonder if you had some presidents who are sort of apprehensive about bringing the year back, then they have an actual FBS conference decide to cancel. Second thing I think they're thinking is this is more long term. As more conferences cancel, and you're out there as the 5 leagues, you look and more every day, like Josh and I know really are. Big business with, for the most part, employees who aren't employees. Now, employees play. They're tweeting the hashtag "We want to play." The NCAA on a model of, right, and don't really want to do things that highlight the fact that these guys aren't really anchors, which is how they get away with not paying.
Yeah, I think your audio is a little choppy there, Bud. Colin will try and fix it in there. But kind of in the meantime, just to kind of go back over that though, think about where we are for a second here, and think about just as a reference point. We last spoke on this show Thursday, and what we were talking about was the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC. What were our takeaways from their conference schedules? And what I kind of want to avoid, and what's really aggravating, is the amnesia factor that seems to creep in all the time. The amnesia factor, you've probably experienced this before. If you've ever debated anyone on anything, it's like if you debate something and you feel like you get a pretty long way with them, if you wake up the next morning and you start back at square one, what did the work the previous day really mean? It meant nothing. So you have the amnesia factor in that, listen, there's some things that we all agree with. Some of you think we should be playing, some of you think we shouldn't be playing, but pretty much everyone can agree we got a pandemic on our hands. Pretty much everyone can agree it is altered reality and will continue to alter reality. Everyone agrees that players should be safe. About 98% of people that I've spoken to and heard from believe that players should be able to opt out if they don't feel safe. Most people agree on all of these. Most people agree that if college football goes away this fall, you're going to have a crippling and long-lasting impact on a number of people's jobs, on a number of local economies. A number of people, I think, a vast majority agree liability is a concern here. No one is ignorant to that. I think we all agree with that. And there are multi-layered, difficult decisions to be made. So to me, it's a waste of time to debate any of that. We all understand that. We're all on the same page with that. When we get back around, though, and then we ask, well, what are we talking about here? What was very, I think, aggravating to a lot of you, and I was right on board with you, is yesterday when the MAC canceled their season, it was already thought to be a foregone conclusion because they lost a vast majority of their games because the Power 5 chose to circle the wagons, understandably so, and say, we're going to play conference games only. The MAC was hung out to dry. I don't think anyone really expected them to have a season. It's very heartbreaking for the players and coaches, and don't think for a second I'm trying to make light of that, because I'm not. But what I'm saying is, when we saw that announcement yesterday morning, you noticed it and I noticed it. Right afterwards, It seemed like a matter of minutes before we had tweets and reports coming out that, well, now we're hearing from Power 5 athletic directors that that's just the beginning. And the MAC making that move is a sign of things to come at the Power 5 level. And if things happen at the Power 5 level, whatever, okay? Just think about that independently for a second. If the Big Ten's going to cancel its season because they can't have one, or the ACC or the SEC, that's all well and good. We'll deal with it. We don't have to like it. But if anyone's looking me in the eye and telling me that the MAC was the impetus, the MAC canceling their season, now that was the impetus, and that made us realize, no, no, no. And then you have to delve into these waters. You have to delve into someone that's, trying to make a good faith argument that may say to you, well, how could you not have a MAC season but still have a Big Ten season? How do you square that morally? Because if the well-being of those MAC players matters enough to cancel their season, then how could you put Big Ten players or ACC players on the field? And that sounds like it makes sense. But when you get below the surface, you understand it's not an apples to apples comparison. It's no different than if I am driving 175 miles an hour up I-75 north of Atlanta and I get pulled over. I'm not going to look at a race at Atlanta Motor Speedway and say, those guys are going nearly 200. Why aren't they being pulled over? Well, there obviously is a different environment there totally, but there are also safety constraints in place. There are things they can do there. It's difference in competition, I understand that, but there are things they can do there that a crowded interstate, it's not conducive to doing. In the SEC, in the Big Ten, I cannot overstate enough the difference in resource between a Power 5 conference like the Big Ten and a G5 conference like the MAC when it comes to being able to protect players and it comes to keeping the safety of players at the forefront. To say it is night and day still, I think, vastly falls short of explaining the gulf that exists between what you're able to do if you're Ohio State University and what you're able to do if you are Miami of Ohio, for example. So a lot of people had a pretty big problem with that, but really what you had a bigger problem with, and I'm just kind of replaying the list of things that I saw a lot of you talking about, but I think I have you back here. I think what a lot of people cannot square in their minds is if we were talking about one thing on Thursday, and we have observed that none of these conferences have managed to work in harmony and in conjunction with any of these decisions. I mean, the SEC didn't even know when the Big Ten was releasing their schedule. So no one's decided, or no one's been able, rather, to work in conjunction to all of a sudden think that all of these entities independently arrived at the same conclusion over the same 24 to 48 hour period is ludicrous, and it's a slap in the face intellectually to anyone who's been paying attention to this. So it becomes very crystal clear again to me, and you can tell me if you disagree, it becomes crystal clear that you either have a lot of people who are waiting for someone else to make the first move, or, and I think this is a big or right now because we're still sitting here Sunday night not really knowing, it may be that one Power 5 conference, let's say the Big Ten, has ultimately made their decision, and maybe the others are not quite as on board as the Big Ten leaks are trying to make you think they are. This is all just speculation. I am not telling you I'm reporting anything or knowing anything, but it's on the table, bud, so let's talk about it.
Sure. So I think to your MAC point, it's an interesting one. And I actually would push back a little bit on the premise that the MAC did this out of safety concern. What if the MAC did this because they lost all of their guarantee games, right? Their games against the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC are pretty much out the window because those conferences canceled and decided to play conference only or conference only a +1 model. And at that point becomes more of a safety and, importantly here, financial decision because, like, wait a second, my school is strapped here. I have to expensive testing procedures and all this extra medical stuff, but I'm not getting big games that come in. I'm not getting ticket sales, most likely, and my schedule during the week will look like TV money. So I push back a little bit on the idea that MAC is doing this purely out of safety concerns. As to the P5 piece, certainly, like, financial concerns are even greater as far as dollars lost. But your point that maybe not all conferences forward, I really good point, Josh. Going. My guess, a lot of reading I've done, again, and people I've spoken, they think that Pac-12 and Big Ten are going to be fairly aligned. What we don't know, and with the other three, we did see Bob Older tonight tell the Austin newspaper that the Big 12 schedule will be out next week. He's, of course, the Big 12 commissioner, Bob Older. I don't think we've seen the or ACC say, which brings a question to you, or maybe later in the show. Is there a critical, like, can you play, can the SEC, ACC, Big 12 play?
Yeah, and let me jump in there right quick, bud. Colin's gonna fix your audio again, because that, like, what he was saying, if you couldn't quite understand what he was saying, is there is one train of thought out there right now that as one Power 5 conference goes, they all go. That's one train of thought. That may very well end up being the case. It also could be the case that they all end up ultimately making the same decision, but they weren't necessarily in alignment. So it was never as one went, all went, even if they all went the same direction. But there's another line of thinking that, hey, maybe the Big Ten, Pac-12, maybe they're attached at the hip and maybe they do end up making the same decision. Here's just kind of something to think about. You think about the weight of the world being on the shoulders of decision makers, and you think about, well, what happens if we have a season and then the worst were to happen and we have multiple outbreaks with like 4 different teams? Of course, that's a worst case scenario. That's one of the worst cases that you play out in your mind. But see, here's the flip side. Just to think about, just to openly speculate amongst ourselves, because we really don't know anything still tonight, is what happens if you're sitting there in the Big Ten, or maybe the Pac-12, and you guys do decide we're going to postpone things, but all the other Power Fives don't follow. And let's say, the SEC, for example, intentionally pushed their start date to the last Saturday in September just for this very occasion, to give them time to watch how things unfold and to push the start date back as far as they could, to give themselves at least observation period. So, what if the SEC and let's say the Big 12, ACC, whoever, let's say a couple of 3 of them end up staying the course and they get their season off the ground? And think about this. What if they were to get their seasons off the ground and the worst doesn't happen? And they may have hiccups now. No one's going to have a season without hiccups, but they get it off the ground and it does happen. And let's say it's week 5 and the SEC is largely getting their season off as they would have hoped to, and the Big 12 is largely getting their season off. Think about being one of those folks that made the decision in the Big Ten then. Think about one of those folks being one of the decision makers in the Pac-12 then. So don't think that there is not certainly risk on both sides. It seems right now, again, and we're kind of going off of reporting tonight, ESPN and Sports Illustrated have each put out kind of independent reporting that suggests multiple critical junctures are being met right now. Seems like there is a majority opinion in the Big Ten that things are going to be put on hold. The big question up in the air right now is, do the other Power 5 conferences follow suit? Or do we have a situation where perhaps ultimately you're not quite as aligned in your thinking as a lot of people thought? Sorry, I was listening to Colin talk.
You're
Okay,
exactly
go ahead,
right. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I don't think there's any doubt that some leagues are probably a little bit more on the cancel train than others. Heck, we could see as early as tomorrow, perhaps an announcement comes down in the P5, but we'll have to see on that. But it is clear, like, they designed the Big Ten schedule to leave them open weeks to where if they had to push back, they could do so. And I'm not crazy enough to think that releasing a schedule guarantees a season. It's just prudent to do so and release a schedule on the off chance or on the chance that you're actually able to play the year. The timing of this does seem pretty interesting to me as well, and perhaps suggest that maybe some of those school presidents were not on board with the release of a schedule as of last week.
Yeah, you know what, I can't really there are a number of things that I can't wrap my mind around, to be honest with you, but you remember when we first went down this road, when it was March and, we first leave the office at 24/7 Sports and spring practice gets canceled. And I think a lot of people, as a novelty, started to put out articles of, what would happen if the college football season were delayed. Now, of course, we didn't think that it was going to actually come to fruition, so none of those theories were going to have to be tested. But then when it got more real in July, And then when we ultimately had announcements that we're gonna condense things to a conference-only format, think about the contingencies. And if you're just trying to do risk assessment here and you're trying to play it out, everyone who's ever done risk assessment understands contingency. It's not a situation where if we can't start on this date, then we just can't do it. But we had everything thrown around from we could have an on-time start date to we could start as late as early to mid-October. We could have a date where, or a situation where the season gets off the ground and then we have to delay things. And so I guess the question that I don't think either one of us have the answer to, but the question that I think remains as we go into this week is, what point is there in making a decision right now? At the very worst, would you not sit there and hit the pause button as your contingency plans, at least one or two of them, no doubt, involved you doing, and wait things out and see what happens? Like, what harm would there be in that, I guess, is the question I and a lot of other people have.
I agree with you. I don't think it's necessarily all that prudent to cancel right now, unless you're worried about the potential dangers of having the kids practice, who've recovered from COVID. I know there's some stuff out there that, maybe the ongoing risks from that are greater than just the quarantine, cough type deal. A lot about the virus that we don't know, and presidents obviously don't know yet. But I agree with you. Like, canceling now doesn't seem all that smart. We could just push back and delay. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I also wonder, in a country where the response to COVID has been largely left up to the states, right, especially compared to a lot of countries, does it not make sense maybe allow just to kind of decide their own? Like, I think it's much better if we have all five, if possible. The only thing holding me back from that is obviously what we said earlier. Every time a domino falls, you sort of there in that guys are actors in name-only spotlight more than ever. So I do think we need a certain critical mass of conferences to go ahead and play.
Yeah, it's by the way, hats off to Colin again for doing everything possible to keep us on the air in the background. We had to start late. We've had audio issues, which continue to progress. But hey, that's live internet, as no one's ever said in history, because most people don't do live internet. So here's the other thing that a lot of you are noticing this now. I'm noticing it too. When we had the delay and our tech wizards were trying to get us on air, I was probably doing the same thing a lot of you were doing. I was watching the chat, and then in another window, just kind of refreshing Twitter, and then had some people texting me, and you would be shocked at how many coaches and players have even less idea than you and I do about what's going on right now. But a lot of you have listened to administrators and athletic directors and university presidents, and you've listened to them say the well-being of the student athlete is ultimately going to be at the crux of our decision making. And that's great. And that should be your motivation. But as word has started to leak of potential cancellations conference-wide or sport-wide, you've seen not one or two, not a few dozen, hundreds and hundreds of college football players in unison speaking out over the last 24 hours, saying unequivocally, we want to play. And a lot of them, Trevor Lawrence being one very, but not the only very notable example tonight, have reiterated what a lot of us have kind of whispered about for several months now. And that is this. It is probably flat out safer for those players, for especially at the Power 5 level with the resources you have there. There's no doubt about it to me. You are safer on a campus with a football team than you probably would be going back home, the average player. Just think about what we're talking about there. Think about what kind of control and structure you can have in place on campus that you can't guarantee anywhere else. You can't guarantee it even if you're just walking amongst the normal student body, if you're going to have kids on campus. And so what I say that for is this. You've had a lot of people telling you, okay, well, we've got player safety and what's best for them at the forefront of our decision making. Well, that was all well and good until a bunch of the players came forward and said, no, man, we'll do whatever. We just want to play. So then the same folks anonymously tell you, no, well, actually, it's not that simple. There's a lot more to it. Now, we're not idiots. We understand what you mean there. What you mean is that L word, that liability issue, and you don't want to have you don't want to have all that weighing on you if the worst were to happen. But see, here's the thing. No administrator, anonymous or on the record, to this point that I've seen, has said our decision making is going to be based on liability. That wouldn't go over very well. That wouldn't play very well. So it's players' safety that's at the forefront until, of course, the players say, no, actually, we're cool with this. And then all of a sudden it's, well, it's kind of like Vince McMahon used to tell fans back in the day, I know what's better for you than you do. That's kind of what you're being told right now if you're a player. And so Bud joins us, same guest, fourth time in the show. Bud, let's say you're a player. Let's say you're the quarterback at Clemson right now. Ironically, you have the least motivation financially because you're set as a first-round draft pick anyway, but yet you're banging the drum that hundreds of other players are tonight that we want to play, and that you're being told, whereas previously it was all about your health and safety and well-being, now you're being told, it doesn't really matter what you want. There are more cards in this deck than just you.
And look, hats off to Trevor Lawrence. I do find it a bit ironic that a lot of these folks who are normally shut up and play now really about the players want. But you and I are pretty much player normally, so we are much. If these guys want to play, they should be able to. I don't really think this has been about player start. It's been about money and protecting the business. Now, here's the thing: liability is still. It's not money. It's losing money. It's a lot of money. You did have significant liability, but you're like there's a lot of guys out there, and from a catch standpoint, I think there is a pretty good aid remaining on campus. These kind of medical testing could easily be safer than returning home, guys. In fact, we've seen a lot of these guys here that, I don't home. What I go to back isn't really all that to put it lightly. With the school, not them catching COVID. The potential ramifications if you run them out there, later we find out actually that pretty good chance it doesn't hurt and it can last like a couple. Maybe playing football practice, and that stuff is not the best. So I think it's a liability concern. And we want to play the kids do play for sure. The question is, are you want to present the idea you're going to have unpaid, non-signed wage? It's not a great.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. By the way, for those of you in the live chat, I am aware of what the audio sounds like, and believe it or not, we do not have 15 production monkeys over here just waiting to be told what to do. So it is everything that we can do to stay on the air right now. So listen, just to put a giant bow on this, because obviously, Bud, I know you and I got to get to bed because we got a lot of meetings in the morning and interviews and whatnot. But just to put a giant bow on this, I think you and I are both in agreement. Well, I think you and I are both in agreement at least on this. Some things have probably been decided behind the scenes right now. Many more, I think, and we're talking Power 5 by Power 5, I think many more of those decisions, you may have folks leaning a certain way, but I don't necessarily think the final stamp has been put on that. And so when I talk about the players, you never know what it is. What one matchstick could change the fire entirely, at least on which side of the fence it burns. And so that's kind of what we keep our eye on right now. And no one on this program, at least, and it's mainly been me, no one on this program has ever looked at you and said, we claim to be experts on this. No one has looked at you on this program, at least, and told you, oh, we know how this thing's going to go one way or the other. Anyone who has told you that has largely been lying to you. I mean, I could have a coin in my pocket right now and guarantee you it's going to land on heads. If I flip it and it lands on heads, it's not like I had inside information. It was going to be one way or the other. This thing was going to turn out one way or the other. So it could be the case that even as of tonight, at the highest levels of certain Power 5 conferences, there have been no final decisions made. In fact, a lot of credible reporting in the last hour has indicated just that. But again, hats off to Colin for even getting any kind of semblance of a show up tonight. Bud, any final words? And if you could do sign language along with the words that you offer in conclusion, then we're sure to know what you're saying.
Okay, so I'm going to throw up 10.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Mm-hmm.
ACC. I think probably okay for now. I can't know how do you do the S with the hand? That might be a gang sign. So we'll go ahead and pass on that for the SEC. It wouldn't also surprise me, Josh, just thinking about this. What if the presidents have voted that if things don't get better by X date, they are going to cancel? Voting to cancel immediately is not the same as voting to cancel if a certain situation doesn't happen. Because my guess is that there are some presidents in the Big Ten who probably do want to play.
Yeah. Yeah, man, your audio sounds great right now. It's never sounded better. I just, you got to wonder. Here's what I go back to. Okay, so we got reports today of an emergency meeting of Power 5 commissioners. It's always fun to play guess the source, and it's not very difficult to figure out where a lot of people's sourcing is coming from right now. I think it's coming from the Big Ten because you have some people categorize it as an emergency meeting of Power 5 commissioners. Well, then you immediately have anonymous P5 commissioners, and Bowlesby just flat out goes on the record and says, well, we had a meeting. There weren't any blinking red lights. Like, we were always going to have this meeting, and I don't know about those fools, but we didn't decide to do anything right now. So it just, you don't know, man. 24-hour periods, we've seen 4 or 5-hour periods completely upend the sport. But I just wonder, as we enter this week, if you have a situation where, a lot of folks at the highest levels of these other P5s were kind of aggravated that the Big Ten jumped the gun initially and made their announcements without conversing with them and at least syncing up the timeline. I almost wonder if now they look at the Big Ten and say, oh, you want us on board with you. You want synergy in this announcement process. No, you go ahead and do what you're going to do, and we're going to make our decision down here or over here or out here. And I almost wonder if you have a little game of chicken going on a little bit to where you could have folks looking at the Big Ten saying, make your move. Go ahead. I mean, you're responsible with your conference, and we are responsible with our conference, and we'll make the best decision for us, and we don't really owe you an explanation at this point.
I think that's very possible. My guess is that the Big Ten is going to bank on if the decision was made by athletic directors, I think everybody's playing. The presidents have kind of the greater liability of the school. I think at the core of their consideration. And it may be in their judgment that it's not smart, but the Big Ten, they have seemed more conservative about this throughout the process. The SEC, did we ever hear about them canceling potentially? Not really.
No.
They took a couple extra days to put the schedule out, but it wasn't, like nobody thought it wasn't going to come out. If the Big Ten domino drops and the Pac-12 follows, I think the real question becomes, would the other 3 play?
If they don't follow, the SEC's probably got the most wiggle room right now just on the surface because they pushed their start date back the furthest. If they don't follow, I kind of talked about this earlier, what's critical is the same way with this, well, if the MAC doesn't play, how can you justify playing? Well, there is a very reasonable and logical explanation for how that could happen. You got to make sure people know it. And it's the same with this. If the Big Ten domino falls and you're not punting on the season quite yet, you better make sure that you're not just anonymously leaking things to media outlets. You got to have somebody take a backbone leadership type position publicly and say, here's why we haven't done anything yet. Here's what we're thinking. And when we make our decision, here will be the reasons why. And listen, Omaha, Nebraska is not Brooklyn, New York. So it could be that you've got a different set of realities in one geographical portion of the country as opposed to the other. You could have different medical professionals telling you different things. You could be well within the risk parameter or the acceptable risk parameter of playing, and you're just willing to do something that maybe the other guy wasn't. But what you can't allow people to do is bang on you like a piñata and you just sit there and take it with folks saying, shame on you, man. All you're concerned about is money. If there wasn't money involved here, then you would have done the exact same thing they did. You can't allow that to happen, man. And you got to make sure also folks understand you talk about what the risk is on the side of playing football. Well, that's risk potentially. You know what's going to happen, and you know the avalanche that's coming if you do cancel. And that's not just pertaining to on the field matters.
There's no doubt about it. And I agree with you completely. If you play, you need to get the messaging right. And the messaging can't be, hey, we don't have records in our league, right? We don't have 400 positives, that have to shut down the school because of that. But you need to kind of make reference to how you have it under control if you do. And if you make that reference, you better damn sure have it under control, obviously. because otherwise you get a little bit of egg on your face. But I agree. Explaining why you're going to play if you are is going to be really key, and it's going to be because hey, like we met with our student advisory council, they like our medical health safety wellness guidance plan, and we start testing protocols. We were testing as much or more than some of these pro leagues. Yes, it's not a risk. There's not a no risk proposition, but these guys are in an age category that is lower risk than in some populations, and so we're going to go ahead and play.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions. I don't think we answered anything necessarily tonight. But hey, one thing we didn't do is talk at you. At least we talked with you tonight. But Elliott, appreciate it, brother. I'll see you bright and early in a Zoom meeting somewhere tomorrow morning. We appreciate you joining us.
All right, Josh, enjoyed it.
All right, man. And again, for Director Colin, who worked Old Testament style miracles tonight to even get us on the air. We appreciate him for that. Appreciate a bunch of you sticking around. I don't know that I would have, but a lot of you stuck around for well over an hour in the live chat. So if I had anything free, if I had any prizes to send you, I'd send it to you. But thus, we don't right now. So we will be back here again, same time Thursday night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. We have no clue what the future holds this week, so we've been right there alongside you this entire time. We'll be right there alongside you come hell or high water this week. I can tell you this now. A lot of people out there, understandably in our industry, and this is a very secondary or tertiary concern. Yeah, I know that word. There are a lot of people in our industry very nervous about potentially losing their jobs. It's a valid concern. So, I mean, it's with us just as much as it's with anyone else. You got bar owners and restaurant owners in college towns that will never play a down of football, that are concerned about their financial well-being and stability. So I don't envy the people that have to make these decisions, but I can tell you on our end, we will not be caught with our pants down if these seasons get canceled. We got stuff planned for you, very entertaining stuff. In fact, things that we never would have been able to do if we did have a season. Obviously, we want the season to happen 10 times out of 10, but we'll have things for you. We'll have plans. We're not going dark for a month all of a sudden if we have a season canceled on us or even delayed on us. So stay with us and follow me on Twitter at LateKickJosh. That's the best way to get updates, and there will be a lot going on this week. I can promise you that. We've got good interviews coming up, good guests coming up in the Social Distance series this week. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We got to get out of here, though, because I don't think, Colin, we've ever been in the studio this late before. So I appreciate you sticking with us tonight. We'll see you same time Thursday night. Until then, stay safe, take care, and God bless.